Okay, we'll ask Josh Smith to lead us in our prayer this morning. Okay, today we're in Proverbs chapter 6. Now, last week we studied chapter 5 and then skipped on over to chapter 7 because both of those chapters are about the same thing. It's about the harlot and the danger that a man has in associating with the strange woman. Now we come back today to chapter 6, and we will take a look at several things that he has to say in here. If we kind of boil things down and look at it, I would suggest a couple of things that if you want to make a study of the book of Proverbs, you might take a look at the first 9 chapters as we are getting acquainted with Proverbs and notice what are the major topics that he says we should watch out for. And so you look at it, and you may come up with 5, 6, 7 different major topics. But then I might say, now back up and find the 3 major topics. If you were going to send somebody out and say, I want you to live a wise life, what would be the 3 major things that you would give that person to do? Think of it in this way. We're studying here about wisdom, and we are personifying wisdom. The proverbist is taking wisdom and acting as though wisdom is a human being, and that you can talk to wisdom, and wisdom talks to you. And so wisdom tells you, you do certain things. Now, what are the things that wisdom says to do? Wisdom talks in here a lot to young men and says, young man, and then we'll give them some advice on what you should do. So let's think about it in this way. Suppose that we were to have wisdom all wrapped up in a woman. All the wisdom in the world. She has it all. That's the one characteristic she has. She knows every wise thing there is to know. And then we have a young man, 18 years old, and we're getting ready to send him out into the world. Now, parents do this all the time. Children get old enough to go to college or move away, and they say, now, remember this. And so they start giving them some advice. Well, what would wisdom tell that young man? What would wisdom say? Now, young man, remember this. Now, first of all, wisdom tells us that the fear of Jehovah is the beginning of knowledge. That's the thing that we have to grasp first of all. So, son, make sure that you always fear, always stand in awe of, and respect Jehovah God. Then wisdom constantly tells this young man, now remember the commandments. Remember the commandments of your father and mother, and remember the commandments of God. So remember, write those commandments upon your forehead, write them upon your hand, fill your head full of them, make sure that you keep all of those commandments. So that'd be the second thing that we would have that he would tell us to do. Now, the third major thing is that keep your heart. Make sure that in everything you keep your heart. You make sure that you keep your mind the way it should be. Don't let things go into it that shouldn't be in there. And when something does creep in, then take control of it and don't meditate on it. Don't think about it. but think about other things. Keep your heart with all diligence. So keep those things in mind, son. And then the other thing that always comes up is that wisdom says, beware of the strange woman. Beware of that. And so don't get yourself caught up in any kind of harlotry. And so over and over again, this creeps up. Bang, bang, bang. And he can be talking about something and then bang, this comes up again. And the advice is flee. Always flee and stay away from that. So son, if you will do these things, if you will fear Jehovah with all your heart, if you will write his commandments as well as your parents' commandments upon your mind and always obey them, that if you will go out and keep your heart, that's the first thing, the most important thing to do, and then stay away from sexual immorality. You'll be all right. You're on your way. Now, that's what he has taught us in here so far. Now, he's taught us that there's some other things to watch out for, and that's what he's going to talk about today. He's going to say, now, here's some other things. But these other things are not nearly as important as the things that we've already studied about. The fear of Jehovah is the beginning of knowledge. That's number one. Keep your heart with all diligence. Put forth all your effort to do that. Now, here's some things that you do. And so he's going to show us, and then he'll tell us what will happen if we don't do these things. Okay, let's start out now in chapter 6. My son, now keep in mind, this is wisdom talking. Wisdom is saying, my son, if thou art become a surety for thy neighbor, if thou hast stricken thy hands for a stranger, thou art snared with the words of thy mouth, thou art taken with the words of thy mouth. Do this now, my son, and deliver thyself. So now then he says, now here's another thing to watch out for. As you're going through life, make sure that you do not become a surety for someone else. Now you say, what does that mean? Well, today we call it a cosigner. We call it somebody who guarantees a debt. For instance, if Rod goes out and he's going to buy something and he doesn't have the money to pay for it, and he's going to have to borrow the money. So he goes to the bank and he wants to buy this thing, but he doesn't have the money, he has to borrow the money. Now, they look at Rod and they say, well, we're not sure he has the capability. So they say, Rod, you have to get a cosigner. You have to get an surety, somebody that will assure us that we're going to get our debt paid back. So Rod comes to me and said, Lowell, do you trust me? Yeah. You believe I'm an honest man? Yeah. All right, would you sign this as a cosigner? I'll pay the debt, I'll do it all. There's nothing that you do. All you do is you just sign it, and the bank will have your name on it, and then they'll loan me the money, and I'll pay for it, and there won't be any problem. So Rod and I have been friends for a long time, and I say, well, sure, Rod, I'll do that. It's not going to cost me a dime, not a dime. So I go up, I sign my name as a cosigner. Or I can do that for my kids or my grandkids. Or I can sign it for any realm. Now, he said, make sure that you don't get caught in that. Because what you're doing is you're obligating yourself for the life of another person. What I'm actually doing now when I do this is let's back up a minute, keep my heart with all diligence. I have this responsibility to make sure that I keep myself right. I keep myself right. I keep my mind right. I keep my relationship with God right. I keep everything right with me. I keep myself pure. And now then, Rod comes along. And all Rod wants me to do is sign a piece of paper. Well, I can do that, and there's no harm done. But he's saying, now when you do that, now I've become responsible for his debt. So for whatever it is, I'm responsible for it. Let's suppose Rod's out working on his porch next week, and there's a loose board, and he falls through and breaks his leg, and the doctor says, you're not going to be able to walk again. And Rod loses his job, and no fault of his own, but here it is, he's got all of this, and so he went down, he had bought something, and so now he tries to sell it. Of course, he can't sell it for what he bought it for, and he can't pay his bill. It's not because he's dishonest, he can't do it. Well, the bank is going to send me a letter. Mr. Williams, would you please come in and talk to us? And I am responsible for that debt. Whatever it is, I become responsible for it. So now I've taken the responsibility of my life, my debts, all of the things I'm responsible for, and now I've taken his. And so now he says, that's what you're doing, and you have become snared with the words of thy mouth. Now, when he talks about stricken your hands and so forth, he means, we'd say today, you shake your hands, you make an agreement, you do this. Today, we say you sign as a co-signer. And he said, now when you do that, why, you have been taken by the words of your mouth. Now, all of a sudden, let's say Rod says, okay, I'm making a good wage. I want to buy an airplane. He used to own an airplane. So I want to buy a Piper Cup. And so it's going to cost $75,000, and he can't afford that right now, so he asked me to sign for it because it only costs, $400 a month, and Rod says I can afford that easily, so I signed for it. And so he has this accident where he can't pay for it, or he takes the airplane out and he wrecks it. There's just a whole lot of things that can happen, and so he can't pay for it, and so he quits paying for it. Now then, it's going to come back to me. I've been caught by my mouth. I've been caught by my decision. It wasn't by somebody else's. Sometimes I might have some bad fortune myself. I might fall through my porch, break my leg, can't have any income, and I can't pay a debt that I've got. Now that's bad. And so I've got to work that out. But now then, on this, I don't have any responsibility for it with Rod, except I say, yeah, I'll do it. And so I have become snared by my mouth. That's the point that he wants us to see. And so now we're snared. We're in a trap. I can go to the bank and tell them what a poor position I'm in. They don't care. They say, you start making your $400 a month payments. Now, I don't know how many of us have ever been in this situation. I won't ask you to hold up your hand because it's embarrassing for those who have done this. But I'm one. When I first moved up here, I got took on this like you can't believe. I was up here, and so there was a family of real nice family, and that was in the church there. And after 3 or 4 or 5 years, they moved off somewhere. And we really hated to lose them because they were just pillars of the church down at Kirkland. And so about 4 years later, he showed up on my doorstep. And, well, hi, good to see you. And where's your wife? And so forth. Well, I'm up here by myself. And so then he told me his bad luck story that, I forget what it was now, but he had lost his job or something. So he was out, didn't have any money, and he was going to get a job down here, and he wanted to come back to Kirkland and be with us because we were like family, and just everything was just fine. And it was just a wonderful relationship that I had with the guy. And so he asked me, he said, could you co-sign for a loan there? And I think at that time it was only $350 or something like that, which would be like $35,000 today or something. I don't know what it'd be like today, but it'd be worth, several $1,000s really. And so sure, no problem, no problem at all. Now at this time, by the way, I was making $75 a week. Keep that in mind. And so the payment, I think, was going to be $25 a month is what it's going to be. I was making $75 a week. So you can transfer that to your income and see, it's pretty big debt, but there was no problem. So I went down and signed that for him. And okay, see you Sunday. He said, yep, see you. And I haven't seen him to this day. He just disappeared. I have no idea what happened. Well, guess what? I started making that $25 a month payment, and I had to make it for several months until I got his debt paid off. Well, that's just an illustration of here was a real nice guy, a friend, and what did I end up with? Now, whose fault was that? That was his fault. He was a liar. He was a cheat. He had gone astray since the last time I knew anything about him. He was coming around taking advantage of people, which means he was a thief. And he took advantage of an innocent man. The innocent guy is me. Wasn't my fault. I didn't do anything. But yet all of you are trying to raise your hand now and say, oh yeah, Lowell, yeah, it was your fault. What did I do wrong? I'm trying to help a friend. My heart is good. It's a benevolent act. I'm helping somebody. What did I do wrong? Well, when he asked me if I'd signed a note, what did I say? Yeah, that's what was wrong. That's what he means. You have been taken in a trap by your own words. So I can't stand up here today and tell you it was his fault. Now, I can say all those other things about him, and all that is true. But whose fault was it that I got myself in that real financial crunch when last thing in the world I could afford that? It was me. Now, this is what he's telling us. He's saying these things are going to happen to you in life. Now, by the way, are we supposed to help the poor? Are we supposed to help the needy? Yeah. So the Bible tells us that, to do that. But it says, make sure you don't get caught in this trap. Because if you get caught, you're entrapped, and there's no way out of it. There's no way that you're going to get out. Now, look at what it says in let's start in verse 3. Do this now, my son, and deliver thyself, seeing thou art come into the hand of thy neighbor. So now then you are under the control of your neighbor. All of a sudden, when I signed for Rod's airplane, Rod now becomes my boss. I have come under his control. And if he doesn't want to pay for that, I have to do it. And so I'm entrapped. And I've come under his control. He said, go humble thyself and importune thy neighbor. Importune means beg and beg and beg and beg, and don't give up begging. Just continue on. That's what importune means. It just means you continue on, you continue on. So I need to go to Rod. Rod, please, how can I get out of this? Would you please let me out of this? And now, how hard is it going to be to get me out of it? For instance, what would happen if Rod says, sure, Lowell, I'm sorry. Let's go to the bank and tell him. So we go up to the bank, and Rod says, Lowell wants out of that. I didn't intend to get him into it, and so let's get him out. What will the bank say? Who else? Yeah. Who else you got? Well, nobody. Well, then no, Lowell's responsible. So the only thing I would know to do, being the kind, gentle, compassionate, sweet, nice, good-looking man I am, I'd say, why don't you go ask Roger? Pull him in. Get somebody else in there as an entrapment that is in there. So you can begin to see, I'm taking time on this just a little bit, but you can begin to see that this is a danger as we go through life. Of when do you help people, and how do you help people, and how do you help people without hurting yourself? And so he says, in this, make sure you get out of it. He said, give not sleep to thine eyes, nor slumber to thy eyelids. I should not even go to sleep until I have somehow or another begged Rod and got Rod somehow or another to get me out of this arrangement, because while I'm in the arrangement, whether he ever defaults or not, I am responsible for somebody's life other than my own. And then he says, deliver thyself as a roe, or that's a deer, from the hands of the hunter, and as a bird from the hand of fowler. So if you go out and you're hunting a deer, how fast does a deer get away when they look up and see you? See? And you say, nice deer, come over here, I'd like to tickle your ears with my gun. See? No, that deer is out of there. Or a bird. You go out and you decide, I believe I'll catch a bird. And they're landing all around you. They're nice birds, and up on the high line, there are birds everywhere, just real nice birds. What happens if you go out and try to catch a bird? It flies away, doesn't it? All right, said that's how you should conduct yourself in such a situation as this. Now, later on, he's going to talk about this again, so we'll not have to spend time on it when we get over there in that realm. Now then, number 6, verse 6. Here's another thing, and it's a thing that, of course, doesn't affect any of you, but it does me. And so here's what he said. He said, go to the ant, thou sluggard. Now, what is a sluggard? It's a guy that acts like a slug. It's a guy that is not energetic, a person that doesn't get up and work, a person that just kind of goes through life like a slug crawls down the sidewalk and just trying to be as comfortable as you can right now. So go to the ant. Go take a look now and consider her ways and be wise. That's what we're talking about. So now, by the way, a couple of times we've learned about where wisdom is. If I want to get wisdom, where do I go? Where did he say go? Anywhere, doesn't he? You can find it anywhere. You can find wisdom out on the street. You can find wisdom, he says, anywhere. Okay, now, if you want to be wise, go to the ant. Stop, take a little time, study an ant, and you can get yourself some wisdom, is what he's saying. Go to the ant, thou sluggard, and consider her ways, and be wise, which having no chief, overseer, or ruler, provideth her bread in the summer, and gathereth her food in the harvest. So go study the ant. Now, when you look at an ant, every time that you have seen an ant, what has the ant been doing? It's been on the move, hasn't it? I've seen ants that come up here and stop. Did you ever see it where it rolls over and takes a nap? No. You know why it stopped. It stopped to make up its mind, which way am I going? I'm busy. And if it stopped, that's a busy stop. It's not a relaxing, it's get going. So go and look, because that ant works the way it should work in the season that it's in. So notice, here's your season. In here, go to her, and it says, if she provideth her bread in the summertime. When the ant can get out and work, she works and works and works and works. How many vacations does she take? Nope, not when she can work. She's out there and she's working, and then she gathers her food, and now then, in the wintertime, she has something to sustain her. So we can learn from the ant. So he said, for the lazy guy, go to her. Then he says in verse 9, how long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? When you morning time comes, work. Even if you're working for Boeing, when you have to be there at a certain time, do you ever wake up and you look at the clock and, I want another 30 minutes? If you're working for yourself, what do you generally do? That's when you take that 30 minutes, isn't it? And when you take that extra 30 minutes and you're laying there and you're yawning, what do you really want when that 30 minutes is up? Well, just a little bit more. So you get up and you look out the window and it's raining. What does that make you want to do? Right? And so you look around and there's always some excuse. Always some excuse that it will be easier to do my job tomorrow than it will be today. So what he says is, I want you to look now, and how long will you sleep, O sluggard? When wilt thou rise out of thy sleep? Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. Pretty well describes a lazy person, doesn't it? You sleep, and then you wake up, and then you slumber, kind of slumbered around there. And then you get up, and you have a cup of coffee, and you get out to do your work, maybe by 10 o'clock. And in other words, he's showing the life of a lazy person. And so he said, now here, when you do this, here's what's happening to you. He said, so shall thy poverty come as a robber, and thy want as an armed man. So here's the way it's going to bring you. For the lazy person that will not get up and work and be diligent in his work, it's going to bring you poverty. Somewhere along the line, you can get by with it for a little while. Somewhere along the line, it's going to bring you poverty, and it's going to come just like a robber. It's just like if somebody, a robber came into your house tonight, held a gun to your head, stole everything you had, walked out of the house. There you are. I don't have anything. Now, we don't need a robber to do that. We can have our sluggishness to do that, not working the way we should work. So he said, your want will come as an armed man. In other words, it's just like somebody coming in and holding you up. A worthless person, a man of iniquity, is he that walketh with a perverse mouth. Now then, here's the next thing, and that is being a hypocrite. Having a perverse mouth. You say, what does that mean? Well, it means saying something that you don't mean. It means saying something that leads other people astray. He said that winketh with his eyes, that speaketh with his feet, that maketh signs with his finger. What is all this? Well, he says there's different ways of being perverse. You can be a hypocrite, you can be perverse by telling somebody something that you really don't mean. Or you can tell somebody something, but then you look over to your friend or somebody else and you wink and you let them know, okay, here's the deal. Here it is. I'm telling Rod about this good deal I got for him or something right here. We'll turn it around now. Rod, you know, if you'll give me the $2,000, why I'll take you in on this deal that, you know, you can't miss and so forth. And I look over and wink at my buddy that's over here. That's what he's talking about. Somebody that's pulling the wool over other people's eyes, that speaketh with his feet, moving your feet to give somebody a sign that's in here, or make the signs with your finger. Not being honest and upright in your dealing with man. He said, in whose heart is perverseness, who shall devise evil continually. So that's what happens to a guy who is a hypocrite and perverse. He's going to devise these evil things continuously, just constantly. Oliver gave me a book the other day. He said, I want you to read about this guy who sold the Eiffel Tower. Now, we'd been talking about con men and what you can expect out of them and how they operate and so forth. And so this whole book is telling about con men. Oliver said, I want you to read the one about the Eiffel Tower and see what happens. Said it's the best that I could ever see. It's just unbelievable. Well, it would make a long story, but here's a guy, and he had an English accent, and so he trying to figure out what to do, and he was constantly going from one place to another and pulling schemes on people and making $10,000, $12,000, $20,000, then living it up, and then right before he went broke, then pull another scheme, and it was unbelievable all the schemes that he had pulled. And so this FBI guy is writing the book and telling about it. So he said, then finally, the FBI got on his tail so close that he decided he better go to Europe. So he takes the guy with him of where he's just his patsy. He's the guy, you know, which he winks at, and the guy that he does this, and he's the guy that helps in the job. So he took him, they go to Europe, and he's reading a paper, and he said, oh, I've got the next one. And in the paper, it talked about that the Eiffel Tower is deteriorating, and some of the legislators were talking about tearing it down. Now, this was years ago, but they were talking about tearing it down because it was just built to be a temporary thing anyway for a World's Fair type thing that they had there. And so he looked at it and said, okay, here it is. The guy said, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to sell the Eiffel Tower. So he chose, I think, about 6 guys, big construction people that works with steel and all this, and he sent them letters and said, come to this hotel room. There's going to be a bid that can make you very rich. And so I told them when to be there. All 6 guys. These are big companies. These are big businessmen, the biggest in the country. They all came, and so he presented it. He told them, he says, now, this is something that is secret, and we don't want it out, and everybody has to swear to secrecy, but I'm going to give you an opportunity, and I'm going to give you a chance to bid on this steel that's going to be coming out of this, and the bid has to be in by next Wednesday or something. And so then he told him, he says, we're going to tear down the Eiffel Tower. And he said, I'm sure that you heard about this. You read about it in the paper and so forth. And so, well, yeah, we read they were talking about it. He said, well, it's going to be a done deal. And we're going to take bids before it gets out and politicians start having problems. And so he put it out. And so he said he picked out the guy that looked the most greedy. He knew, which one he's going to take. So they all leave. They send in their bid. And he knows this one guy he can manipulate. Now, this is just telling a story about all this that's going in up here. And it's a real big one. So they sent in their bids. And he called this guy and he said, you have won the bid. Could you please come to my room? So he came there and back and forth. Why it went. And so the guy finally cut him a check for, at that time, it's back in the 40s, $25,000 there for his bid. And then he talked to him and he said, now we government people don't get paid very much. And in order for us to make a living, we have to buy good clothes and we have to do this and that. The guy said, okay. He said, wasn't born yesterday. He said, this is a bribe. And he said, well, yeah. So he then gives him another $10,000. So he takes the money. He said, okay, then here it is. And, so the news will come out Wednesday or whatever it is. So he takes $10,000, runs over, gets on a train, away they go, leaves the country. And so the guy said, well, what are we going to do when he reports it to the police? They said he won't. Said it's going to be embarrassing for him, so he won't do that. And so they keep watching the papers. He never does report the police. So the guy said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to sell the Eiffel Tower again. Said, we'll just do that again. That was a good thing. So he goes back and he pulls it again. And he sold it twice. And so he left town. But the guy that bought it the second time, he was so mad that he reported him to the police and took all the embarrassment himself, humiliation. It was just great humiliation, caused all kinds of problems and all of this, but put him on the run again. But that didn't stop him. He was getting ready to sell it a third time, but that didn't stop him, and he goes on and on and on and on. Well, all I'm getting at is just telling the story right in here, that this is what it's talking about. It's talking about people who are con men. Now, very few are able to sell the Eiffel Tower twice, see? But how full is the world of people that will lie to you, will be perverse, and that's what he's saying. Wisdom teaches you, don't you do that. So what he's saying today is these 2 things. Don't be lazy, work hard. And number 2, don't be perverse, be truthful in whatever you do. Okay, there's where our class then will stop us today.